When you deploy your applications to Kubernetes, most of the time you want them to interact with other applications in the cluster, as well as expose some of them to the internet. And since the Nginx Ingress controller is retiring soon, we'll spend some time comparing Ingress and Gateway API with hands-on examples like canary deployments. Let's build on the previous video example with Bookstore microservices and explore how we can deploy it in Kubernetes. When you deploy an application in Kubernetes using a deployment, it creates as many pods as you specified in the deployment spec. Let's say we have 3 pods, and each of them gets a unique IP address, which is usually only routable within the Kubernetes cluster unless you use cloud-native networking, which we'll cover later. Pods in Kubernetes are ephemeral. They live, they die, and they get replaced. Every time a pod restarts, it gets a new IP address. If our application is trying to talk to another one using its direct pod IP, the connection will break the moment that backend pod is replaced. The simplest and default way to fix this is to create a service of type ClusterIP. It uses a label selector to get all pods' IP addresses. You can use the following command to verify that your service label selector is correct and that you have the IP addresses of all pods. ClusterIP also gets a static virtual IP address as well as a DNS name that can be resolved only within the Kubernetes cluster. The DNS name is exactly the same as the service name itself, but only when you're calling it from within the same namespace. Every time the API gateway routes traffic to the user service, ClusterIP would use a random or round-robin approach to distribute requests across all available pods. So now we will use deployment objects and create ClusterIP services for the user, catalog, and order microservices, as well as we'll deploy Postgres using a stateful set and headless service. Instead of using a dedicated database for each microservice, we just dedicate specific tables that only a certain microservice can access for simplicity. It's also very common to deploy each microservice in its own namespace. In that case, you'd use the service name combined with the namespace as the DNS record to reach the target microservice. You can think of ClusterIP as an internal load balancer with a built-in DNS name that your application can use out of the box to talk to other applications inside the same Kubernetes cluster. The simplest way to expose your service outside your Kubernetes cluster is to use NodePort. When we create a service of type NodePort for the catalog microservice, Kubernetes will still create a cluster IP so internal traffic still works, as well as reserve a specific port on every single node in your cluster, in our case, 30,120. Any traffic that hits any node's IP address on that specific port will be forwarded to your service, which then sends it to your pods. Your actual application might be running on a different node, and if the request goes to a node that does not have your pod, it will still be forwarded to the correct Kubernetes node. So it makes your service reachable from outside the cluster using a node IP address and the port. And the same port is opened on every node. If you have 3 nodes, you can hit the IP of node number 1 or node number 3 on that port, and you'll reach the same app. A NodePort service actually sits on top of a ClusterIP service. It's basically an entry point that hands traffic off to the ClusterIP mechanism we discussed earlier. It's very simple and great for quick testing or development environments where you don't have a fancy cloud load balancer. It is also low cost since you don't have to pay for an external cloud provider's load balancer service. But on the other hand, there are a few problems with this approach. When you use NodePort and create an external DNS record for your client, you need to list those node IP addresses. So the client would use your DNS name, like catalog.example.com, and resolve it to one of the Kubernetes node's IP addresses. The problem is that if you create new nodes, maybe when you upgrade your Kubernetes cluster to a new version, your Kubernetes nodes might get new IP addresses, which would break your DNS. So every time your node's IP addresses change, you need to manually update your DNS record. Also, there are security considerations. You are exposing your node's IP addresses directly to the network. Usually you only use NodePort in non-production environments or very specific bare metal scenarios where you don't have access to an automated load balancer. This can be a nice starting point in your development environment when you prepare and test your applications without having any real clients. Let's go ahead and create a production-ready deployment next. Now, we're ready to promote our application to production, and instead of NodePort, we can create a service of type load balancer. In cloud environments like AWS, for every single load balancer service, AWS will create a dedicated elastic load balancer. With the new load balancer controller and native VPC networking, AWS will create a network load balancer and add every single pod IP address in its target group. Other clouds have similar setups as well. So now we get a single stable DNS record of the load balancer that we can use and create a CNAME record for. This way, we don't need to worry about node IP addresses, and we can use the default HTTP ports 80 or 443 instead of a custom node port like 30,120. The request to catalog.example.com/books will be routed to our pod inside Kubernetes and mapped to an application-specific port like 8080. Another benefit: we can get a TLS certificate from AWS, add it to the load balancer to handle encryption, and send plain HTTP traffic to our app. In the previous NodePort example, we would need to terminate TLS on each application, which adds maintenance complexity. The biggest problem with this approach is the cost. You have to pay for every single load balancer you create, and the price is usually structured in two ways. You pay an hourly rate for each load balancer even if you are not using it, and you pay for the usage. So if you have many external applications, it can significantly increase your infrastructure cost. If you just have a single app that is exposed to the client, keep using a single load balancer. It's the simplest, most reliable production setup to expose your applications. Instead of creating a load balancer for each application, you can create a single network load balancer and use an Ingress controller to route traffic to specific microservices in your Kubernetes cluster. For a long time, the most popular Ingress controller was the Nginx Ingress controller. When you create an Ingress resource and apply it, the Ingress controller parses all those configurations and converts them to native Nginx config. This allows you to have a single load balancer and use path-based routing. For instance, when a client requests the user endpoint, the request is forwarded to the user application. If the path is /catalog, it forwards request to the catalog microservices. You can also use domain-based routing. For example, instead of /user, you could use user.example.com, and instead of /catalog, you could use catalog.example.com. In this setup, every single request that comes to the load balancer is sent to the Ingress controller and routed to the appropriate microservice. The first benefit is that you can reuse the same load balancer for all your applications. Second, we also frequently use Cert Manager to automatically obtain TLS certificates from Let's Encrypt. This offloads TLS at the Ingress level, so applications receive plain HTTP traffic. As a result, you don't have to manage certificates on every single application exposed to the internet. Auto-renewal is automated as well. Finally, I prefer Ingress because you can scrape latency, throughput, and other metrics directly from the Ingress controller. This avoids the need to instrument each separate application and update its source code. With these out-of-the-box metrics, you can add alerts. For example, if latency increases above 5 seconds, or if the number of requests per second exceeds 10,000, you might want to scale your application. For a very long time, using Ingress for external services and ClusterIP services for internal microservices was the most common approach for production setups. Of course, some teams use service meshes like Istio, but for most companies, service meshes are overkill. Recently, it was announced that the Nginx Ingress controller will be retired in March 2026. There are many other Ingress controllers, including the native AWS Load Balancer controller that creates application load balancers, as well as traffic and many others that will still work. But it's obvious that the Kubernetes community is moving to the new Gateway API. In the future, it will probably become the standard way to handle this and completely replace Ingress. The shift to the Gateway API is largely about separating concerns. In the old Ingress model, a single developer often had to manage the load balancer's IP, the TLS certificates, and the routing paths all in one file, which is a security and management nightmare in large companies. In order to use Ingress, a platform engineer has to install it into the Kubernetes cluster using a Helm chart or plain YAML files. When installing it, cloud platforms like AWS would create an elastic load balancer for that specific Ingress controller, and it automatically registers an Ingress class in your Kubernetes cluster that is linked to that Ingress controller. The next step for the platform engineer is to install Cert Manager so that we can dynamically obtain TLS certificates from Let's Encrypt. Now, a developer can create a deployment object along with a service and an Ingress. In the Ingress, you would specify the cluster issuer from Cert Manager to obtain and renew certificates, and you specify the Ingress class name that is provided by the platform engineer. The developer also has to specify the Kubernetes secret, where Cert Manager stores the private key for the certificate. And of course, the developer would need to specify the application routing. In this case, request-to-catalog.example.com must be forwarded to the catalog service. On the other hand, to use the Gateway API, the platform engineer first, in most cases, installs Gateway API custom resources, since they do not come by default yet, and installs one of the controllers. One of the most common ones is Istio. So when you install Istio, you'll get a gateway class that your Kubernetes cluster operators can use to create gateways. It does not create a load balancer at this stage. Next, the platform engineer or cluster operator must create a gateway and specify the Cert Manager cluster issuer as well to obtain certificates, as well as the gateway class. So as you can see, at this point, certificates are actually managed by the platform engineer or cluster operator rather than the developer. In this case, the developer only creates a deployment, service, and HTTP route, where the developer or service owner specifies only routing and leaves certificate management to the platform engineer. Secondly, you can only use it for HTTP-based applications, including gRPC and WebSockets. But if you need to expose a custom protocol, for example, MongoDB or Kafka, there are some hacks like updating the Nginx config map to add TCP and UDP services. But in general, you would use a load balancer for each application that uses any other protocol than HTTP. And finally, when we use Ingress, most of the custom logic is placed in the annotations, which are implementation-specific. The Gateway API, on the other hand, standardizes many common use cases that used to be managed by annotations and are now part of the native API. For example, in order to perform a canary deployment, which is when you only expose a new version to a small subset of clients, if you use Ingress, you would create a deployment for the stable version, in this case, v1, as well as the service. Also for the canary, in our case it's v2, we would create a deployment and service as well. Then we would create a main Ingress, which would serve the main v1 version, and a second Ingress for the canary deployment. To implement the canary using the Nginx Ingress controller, you would use the following annotations to specify in percentage how much traffic to send to the canary. In this case, we send 10% to the new version, and we can gradually increase and test. Again, these annotations are only Nginx specific, and if you use a different Ingress, you need to use different annotations. When using the Gateway API, it's part of the native API included in HTTP route, so any gateway controller like Istio, Envoy, Traffic, and others must implement that API on their backend, but the usage is exactly the same. Here, for example, we can shift traffic to the canary using the wait property. Another cool feature: if you use a service mesh like Istio, you can perform canary deployments and use the same Gateway API for internal microservices east-west traffic, as well as for north-south traffic, which is exposed to the clients outside of the cluster.